Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this year as a zechus for Besoros Tovos for Am Yisrael. Okay. Sorry. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Iyar, Habalin Lotova, Shmuel and Rabin Karapkin, commemoration of the yahrzeit of Shmuel's father, Lipa Ben Yecheskel HaKohen Zichron Livracha. Our week of learning sponsors, Ari and Haley Lichtman, Le'ilei Nishmas, Haley's mother, Rachel Leah Bas Ruvain Meir Zichron Livracha, and our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Bernard and Varda Birnbaum, in memory of our beloved grandmother, Miriam Bas Yisrael Pinchas, for Refuah Shalema for our brother Chaim Shlomo Ben Malka, Besok Shachol Yisrael, and for the protection of Klal Yisrael, the safe return of our beloved brethren in captivity, and the Hatzlacha for all of our holy soldiers. I both say with that, let us begin. Baruch Hashem, we have another daf ahead of us today. Yesterday we were Zocha to go ahead and do the Mishnah and begin the new Masechta together. Today, in Eretz Hashem, we will begin the Gemara together. So we are picking up today's daf is daf Gimel 3. We are and a welcome to all of the new people who are here for Shevuos, both in person as well as online. A great zechus to have you. So we are picking up at the Gemara on Daf Beis Amud Beis 2b, 2 lines up from the bottom. Michti. So I remember again. So the Mishnah it was really as far as Mishnayos go, it was excellent. It was excellent. I think that was like a 10 out of 10, that Mishnah, right? Anything and everything you wanted in Yiddishkeit, you had it, right? We had Negoim, we had Shabbos, we had Shevuos, we had Seirim, we had buckets of goats, right? Goat buckets, we coined that term yesterday, right? Everything you could possibly want out of a Mishnah, Baruch Hashem, we were Zocha to be able to find it. So now, the Gemara wants to unpack the Mishnah. So the Gemara says as follows, Michti, Tanami Makos Salik. You read that phrase so longingly. We just finished with Makos. Right? The words of Chabakuk, Tzadik, Bemunaso, Yichya, the words of Rabbi Akiva Nechamtana are still ringing in our ears. And by the way, Siyum tonight in Eretz Hashem begins at 6:45. And with Mincha, then Siyum at 7 o'clock. There is still time. There is still time to register. If you would like, you won't get food, but you can add. I'm just kidding. You will get food. There's plenty of food. You'll get. It's going to be a beautiful event at the home of Kili and Jillian Goldberger. So if you would like to come, just private message me and Mir Hashem, and we'll get you in. So remember again. So the Gemara says we are finishing up from Maseches Makos. So Tana mi Makos Salik, Ma'ishta de Tani Shevuos. Why are we here? Why Shevuos? As I both say, Masechtas are linked, and the progression of Masechtas is methodical. So why are we going from Maseches Makos to Maseches Shevuos? So the Gemara says very simple. Mishum detani chayiv ala rosh shtayim achas mikan ve'achas mikan, top of Gimel, v'alazakon shtayim mikanu shtayim mikan ve'achas milamata. So remember again, one of the last sugyas that we had in Maseches Makos was the halachos concerning shaving off your payas. So remember again, what was the nature of shaving off your payas? So the Mishnah said, Chayav ala rosh, you're obligated for rounding out the corners of your head. One corner here, one corner there, right? There's 2 prohibitions. And for the beard, there's actually 5 spots, right? Remember again, the temples, the jawbone, and the chin. So what's unique about this? So the Gemara says, Chada, what was unique about this halach is, remember again, there's one prohibition, right? There's a prohibition not to destroy your beard. There's a prohibition not to round out the corners of your head. So it's one prohibition, yet it's one prohibition that results in multiple sub-prohibitions, right? In other words, if I go ahead and I round out both corners of my head, it's one lav, right? But yet I'm chayiv twice. I destroy my beard with a razor, right? So at the end of the day, again, it's one lav, yet it has 5, I'm chayiv 5 times. So the Gemara Maseches Makos, the last formal halacha that it dealt with was this concept of one lav that could ultimately translate into multiple layers of liability. So therefore, we'll say, what was our Mishnah in Shevuos? Right? Our Mishnah in Shevuos was Shevuos Shtayim Shein Arba. It was all of these examples of Shtayim Shein Arba. 2 biblically paradigmatic cases that ultimately, again, turn into 4 cases total of liability. So essentially, the Mishnah Maseches Shevuos is really just picking up on that same theme of quote-unquote 2 that are 4, one that is 2, right? 1 that is 5, and now 2 that is 4 in our Mishnah. Beautiful. Therefore, again, the Gemara says, Tana Shevuos Shtayim Shein Arba. Beautiful. Okay, so now ask the Gemara. So we'll say, so now we understand the connection between Maseches Shevuos and Meseches Makos. Beautiful. Maishna hacha the Tana lekulu u'maishna gabi yitzias Shabbos u'maras negoim the loka Tana lekulu. So let's remember again in our Mishnah. We had three examples of Shtayim Shein Arba, two biblically paradigmatic cases that ultimately again birth two additional cases as well, right? Case number one was Shevuos, oaths. Case number two was Yedias Hatuma, right? Ritual purity, impurity, which we spoke about again, we'll talk about today, or ritual impurity. And then number three was Shabbos, that's four cases. Shabbos, and number four was Negoim, Saras. So here's what's interesting. Here, obviously, Meseches Shevuos, we're talking about all four cases. Yet, interestingly enough, the Gemara says, when it comes to the Meseches Shabbos, and by the Mishnayos of Negoim of Saras, it only quotes in Shabbos, it only quotes the cases of Shabbos, and by Saras, it only quotes the cases of Saras. So the Gemara is asking just as like a textual question. Why is it here by Shevuos, we quote all of the cases of Shtayim Shein Arba, and yet in those other places, specifically by Shabbos and by Saras, Shabbos only quotes the case by Shabbos, doesn't quote the other three cases. Saras only quotes the case by Negoim, only quotes the case by Saras, and not the other three cases. Okay, so a stylistic question to which the Gemara says, I'll tell you, Amri Shevuos v'Yedias Hatuma, the Gabe Hadadi Ksivin, the Damyan Ahadadi beCarbon Olaviore, Tani Lahu Gabi Hadadi. So let's listen to this. Out of the four, there are two of them that have some level of overlap. What are the two cases of overlap? The case of oaths and tumah. Oaths and tumah both have the same overlap. Have some overlap. How so? Number one, they are written next to each other in the Torah. So that's number one, right? They're juxtaposed scripturally. And number two, they both share the same liability of a carbon oleviorate. Remember again, we spoke about this in yesterday's daf. The carbon oleviorate is the unique sin offering that is dependent on your financial station in life. An ani brings one carbon, an usher brings a different carbon. So that carbon applies to both cases of Shevuos and Tumah. So because number one, they are scripturally juxtaposed, and because number one, and number two, they share the same carbonic liability, therefore again, they're mentioned together. Now, we'll say, so that's why in Meseches Shevuos, we're automatically going to also include Tumah, because again, scriptural juxtaposition and shared carbonic liability. Once we're mentioning two, then what? Once we're mentioning two, the Gemara says, V'aydi de tani tarti, tani kulu. Once you've mentioned two out of the four cases of Shtayim Shein Arba, then what? Then you might as well go ahead and mention the other two. That's the style. Say for Rabbi again, so just understand what we have so far. Now, number one, I understand why Shevuos comes after Makos, because Makos ended off with a case of one lav that results in multiple layers of liability. So Shevuos picks up with a case of Shtayim Shein Arba, two biblically paradigmatic cases that yields an additional two. That's the progression. And number two, why are all four mentioned here? Yet in other circumstances, only the particularly relevant cases mentioned, because one's going to mention Shevuos or is going to mention Tumah, because they're linked scripturally and carbonically. Once you're mentioning two, then ultimately what? You might as well mention the other two as well. Beautiful. The Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, there's a tremendous Musar Haskell in this also. You say to yourself, I understand if you would have said once it mentioned three, some mentioned the fourth. But it's like, once you mention two, I don't know, you could go either way on that. There's a tremendous Musar Haskell that Chazal are trying to teach us. I was talking with someone about doing Meseches Shevuos. A person did Makos with us, and then I said, you continue with Shevuos. It's like, no. I said, why not? It's like, really, because I was just gonna do Makos. I said, but why not? It's like, no, I'm not gonna do it. I said, I promise you, if you can give me a compelling reason why you're not going to do Shevuos, I'll leave you alone. Like forever, right? I'll leave you alone. But if you're just saying, nah, what is that? You could tell me, I'm learning 14 other Masechtas. I don't have time for Shevuos. All right, fine. I'm driving 15 carpools. I don't know, but just like, nah. First, at least use a proper English word. That's number one, right? Not some type of grunt. Nah, I'm not doing it. Why? there are so many beautiful opportunities that present themselves in life. Now, sometimes you can't take advantage of all of them. That's the nature of life. If I have a legitimate reason not to take advantage of an opportunity, of course, no one can take advantage of it. But so often in life, it's just like, nah. It's just like, no, I'm not doing it. And Chazal come along and say, but why not? You already have 2 cases. Let's just do 4. You finished Makkos. Why not do Shevuos? You finished Shevuos. Why not do Avodah Zarah? Right? Right? In other words, why not? If you already started down a path in life, right? If you already did something, unless there's a compelling reason not to continue forward, why not? Incredible, Moshe and everything. Let's go back there. So the Gemara says as follows: Pasuk b'Shevuos, mafarish dias atuma. So as I say, now the Gemara asks another style. So today is a lot about understanding the framework of the Mishnah. So remember again, the Mishnah the Mishnah went in a very strange direction, right? The Mishnah quoted the 4 cases of Shtayim Shein Arba, right? It begins with, right? So it goes Shevuos, right? Shevuos, Tuma, Shabbos, Tzaras. Then the rest of the Mishnah was about what? The rest of the Mishnah was about what? I'll give you a hint. We did it yesterday, right? The entire share was just the Mishnah, right? The rest of the Mishnah was about Tumah. You have like an art scroll right in front of you. Just literally, like just turn the page back. Right? Again, so the rest of the Mishnah was about Tumah. So the Gemara says, I don't understand stylistically that doesn't make sense. If the heading is Shevuos, right, and the Masechta is Shevuos, you mention Shevuos, and then literally the rest of the Mishnah, which was a very long Mishnah, it was a block Mishnah, the rest of the Mishnah was Tumah. What's the pshat? What's the pshat? This is very interesting. The Gemara said, Pasuk b'Shevuos mafarish dias atuma. So I don't understand. You opened with Shevuos, but then you went ahead and spent the rest of the time on Tumah. To which the Gemara says, very interesting, Aidi dezutron milayhu, pasik sharilahu, v'hadr tani Shevuos tenefishi milayu. This is very interesting. I'll say, so stylistically, the Gemara says like this. Actually, fascinatingly enough, the laws of Tumah, at least in this regard, of the Shtayim Shein Arba, like this type of Tumah liability, is relatively succinct. Succinct is relative, right? But it's relatively succinct. Versus the laws of Shevuos, which are much more complex. So therefore, the Gemara made a conscious decision to essentially, let's finish the laws of Tumah. We mentioned Tumah, let's finish the laws of Tumah because they're more self-contained. After we finish that, then we'll launch a more exhaustive conversation about Shevuos, which I will say is also a tremendous Musar Haskell if you think about it, because in life, there are different ways that a person should approach accomplishments, right? We all want to accomplish in life, and therefore we all set for ourselves objectives and goals. So in general, there's this type of tension, I think, that we often encounter about what type of objectives and goals should I set for myself. Is it more important to focus on like long-term goals, long-term objectives, or short-term goals, In other words, should I put my energies in like, okay, I know where I have to get my life ultimately, get myself ultimately, that's where I should put my kochos? Or maybe it's more kedai sometimes to like rack up some short-term wins, right? Just some short-term goals that maybe aren't necessarily global, but right now they're good and they give me those wins. And sometimes when you rack up those short-term wins, that gives you like a lot of wind in your sails. That gives you some good fuel. So it's interesting. There's no right or wrong. Different things work for different times, but it seems to you over here that the Gemara is favoring, at least in this moment, that latter approach. Let's knock out Tumah. Right? Like, let's deal with that right now, because it's right here. We can get a handle on it. We could start it. We could finish it, and then we could move on to Shevuos afterwards. And there is a yisod like this, that sometimes in life, it may be kedai to be a little less long-term focused, a little bit more short-term focused. Get some wins under your belt, right? Get some positive momentum. Move yourself forward. Get in a good place, and then in Meretz Hashem, you're even more empowered to engage in that long-term personalistic planning. Incredible. Okay, Shevuos Shtayim Shein Arba. So as I say now, interestingly enough, we spent so much time in yesterday's Mishnah explaining all the cases. It happens to be the Gemara now goes through them. Again, not in longhand, but just explanations. Here we go. So remember again, and there's also good chazar from the Mishnah. First case of the Mishnah, Shevuos Shtayim Shein Arba. In case of oaths, there are 2 cases, two biblically paradigmatic cases that ultimately, again, yield another 2. What are the 2? What are they? Shtayim. So we'll say, so what are the 2 biblically paradigmatic cases? And again, remember again, we're going to talk a lot about Shevuos. not now, right? But when we get to it, but remember, as I mentioned yesterday's daf, this is called Shevuos Bitui. A Shevuos Bitui is an oath where you make a declarative statement. Okay? So the biblically paradigmatic cases are Shtayim, Sha'ochal v'Shalo Ochal. Right? I swear, I will eat or I won't eat. Okay, that's a Shevuos Bitui. Now those are biblically paradigmatic cases. So again, I will say, what do you see from here? According to the approach the Gemara is making now is the biblically paradigmatic case is a future tense Shvuah. I swear I will eat something, I swear I won't eat. And as I mentioned in yesterday's daf, it's not just about eating. In other words, I swear I'm going to go to Eretz Yisrael. Right? So you could fill it whatever you want. It's just giving the example of eating. Future-oriented oath about something I'm going to do or not going to do. That yields two more cases. Shein Arba, Achalti v'Shalo Achalti. And the two additional cases, right? So the two additional cases are same oath, same Shevuos Bitui, but what? Past tense. I swear I did eat something. I swear I didn't eat something. Okay, so that's the case of Shevuos Shtayin Shein Arba. Next, Yedias HaTumah Shtayin Shein Arba. When it comes to Tumah awareness, there are two cases that are for. So the biblically paradigmatic case is Shtayim Yedias Tumas Kodesh. Shtayim Yedias Tumas Kodesh. V'Yedias Tumas Mikdash. So what are the two biblically paradigmatic cases? So we'll say, so the case over here is like this. The biblically paradigmatic cases are, I forgot that I was tamei, right? Now again, remember, says we saw in yesterday's Mishnah, without going through all the cases again. In order to be chayiv a carbon ola v'yored, what do you need? You need awareness of your tumah at some point in the beginning, right? When you contracted it, let's say. So the case over here is, I knew I was tamei, I forgot I was tamei, and then one of two things happened. Either I entered into the Beis HaMikdash without awareness, or I consumed Kodesh without awareness, and then I subsequently become aware of what it is that I did. Okay? So therefore the biblically paradigmatic case is where the lapse of awareness was about the tumah. I knew that I was tamei, I forgot what I was tamei, then I was tamei, I ate Kodesh, I entered into the Mikdash. That yields two more cases, Shein Arba, Kodesh Mikdash. What are the two additional cases? The two additional cases was, I didn't forget that I was tamei. I knew that I was tamei. What did I forget? I forgot that I was walking into the Beis HaMikdash, and I forgot that I was going ahead and consuming Kodesh. Good. So those are the two cases. That are the four cases. Next, Yitzios Shabbos, Shtayim Shein Arba. The cases of Shabbos, Hotzah, which means transferring an object from one domain to another, are two cases that are really four. What are the two primary cases? Shtayim, Hotzah da'ani, v'hotzah da'balabayis. So let's remember again, we mentioned it's all good chazara. The biblically paradigmatic cases of Hotzah are what? Transferring an item from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. That's how it works. And I will say, I want to point out, why is that the biblically paradigmatic case? Remember again, Omalachos and Shabbos come from where? The Mishkan. Where was Hotzah done in the Mishkan? Potentially the removal of the crushing, the removal of the boards from the wagons, right, into the camp. The wagons themselves were a Rishus HaYachid, and removing them would be into Rishus HaRabim. So the biblically paradigmatic case of Hotzah is Rishus HaYachid. Now, there are two ways you can move an item from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. From Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, right? Case number one is, let's say the guy in the house takes the item in the house and he goes ahead and he transfers it out of the house. Case number two is how the guy standing in Rishus HaRabim puts his hand into the Rishus HaYachid, lifts the object, and pulls it out. So those are the two biblically paradigmatic cases. That then yields two more cases. Shein Arba, Hachnasa da'ani, V'achnasa da'balabayis. The two additional cases are what? Are transferring an item from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. And that occurs in one of two ways. The guy in Rishus HaRabim takes the object from Rishus HaRabim, puts it inside to Rishus HaYachid, or the guy from Rishus HaYachid extends his hand into Rishus HaRabim, takes the object and pulls it into his domain. Beautiful. Maros Negoim, Saras, last of the four cases. Maros Negoim, Shnaim Shein Arba, are two cases that are really four cases. What are the two biblically paradigmatic cases? Seis u'baharas. Mamash past week's parasha. Seis and baharas. So those are the two primarily identified forms of Saras. Shein Arba, Seis v'tol dasa, Baheres v'tol dasa. So we're going to see here, the Gemara doesn't really delve into this more, but we're going to see that there is a tolda, there's an offshoot of Seis, and there is an offshoot of Baheres. Okay, Shabbos says, so now, good chazara, we've gone through all of the cases in the Mishnah, where the common denominator is each of these cases have two biblically paradigmatic cases, which then yield two more cases afterwards. Okay, beautiful. To which the Gemara says, Mani masnisin, whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect? Lo Rabbi Shmuel, but lo Rabbi Akiva. Not Rabbi Shmuel, not Rabbi Akiva. Why? What's going on over here? Rabbi Shmuel. So we'll say Rabbi Shmuel, the Omar, Eino chayiv al ha'asid lavo. This is very interesting. I was saying, like, obviously, we're going to get into all of this in Mirz Hashem in the coming dapim. But the Rabbi Shmuel holds that for Shevuos bitui, you are not chayiv ultimately again for a future-oriented oath. You're only chayiv for past tense oaths. So, according to Rabbi Shmuel, I could be chayiv. A Shevuos bitui would be I ate or I didn't eat. But I will eat or I won't eat. That is not a Shevuos bitui. Well, here's the problem. The problem is our Mishnah counts by Shevuos Shtayim Shein Arba. The additional two that are, according to the Mishnah, the biblically paradigmatic two are what? Future-oriented oaths, right? And the additional ones are past tense oaths. Well, obviously, that's in conflict with Rabbi Shmuel. So our Mishnah can't be Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva, ha'amar al helam tumahu chayiv ve'eno chayiv al helam mikdash. Interesting. Rabbi Akiva holds that in the cases of tumah, you're only chayev carbon olev yoreit if you forget that you're tameh, right? And then enter into the mikdash or consume kodesh. But if you remember that you're tameh, but you forgot that it was the Beis Hamikdash, or you forgot ultimately again that it was kodesh you were consuming, you're not liable. Well, that also stands in contradistinction to our Mishnah. I will say, just by the way, as an aside, see these. Can you imagine someone who forgets that he's walking into the Beis Hamikdash? Right? Like, how does that work? What do you think? It was 7-Eleven? Like I don't know. What do you think? Well, I would say, but you see something amazing. You see something amazing. You see that at the end of the day, at a certain point, novelty wears off, right? Novelty wears off, right? It's I'll tell you like this. When we moved into the new shul, I made a big push in the shul, that people shouldn't walk in with cups of coffee. Just for davening. I don't mean here in the Beis Medrash. By learning, it's different. But I mean just in general, you go into davening. We really only use that shul, that main Beis Medrash for davening. You don't walk into davening with a cup of coffee. You just. There's something so wrong about it on so many different levels. It just represents you. If you were going to meet Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Zechatzadeh v'Kalash Livracha, no one would walk in, right, with a huge mug or a seltzer or anything else. You just want to, I'm really thirsty, right? No one. It's so interesting. No one would dream of bringing something to drink in if they would go to. But I like to stay hydrated. Okay, but still, no one would do. No one would do it. And yet, I come into the Beis Hashem. And somehow, now again, it doesn't come from a bad place, chas v'shalom. It comes from a certain sense of regilos. It's just when you become comfortable with something, so at the end of the day, you just take certain liberties. We do this with our loved ones often, right? You just take certain liberties with things that you become comfortable with. So, we think about the Beis Hamikdash and this sense of awe and the sense, because we haven't had it for 2,000 years. But the unfortunate reality is, that once you have something for long enough, you just begin to take it for granted a little bit. And that's one of the things that we have to work on so much in life, right? It's one of the key things we have to work on in marriage, a sense of hischadshus in marriage, that no matter how long a person has been married, whenever they see their spouse, there should be a sense of excitement and a sense of love and a sense of newness that's there every single time. It's the same thing in our Yiddishkeit, right? What does the pasuk, what does Rashi say? B'chol yom tiyu beinecha kechadoshim. The whole avoda of Yiddishkeit is that every single day, it should be new. To me, you ever watch a bar mitzvah boy when he's putting on his tefillin? Right? And he's fumfering around and things he doesn't move his head because he's, scared the Shalrosh is going to, but then, once he settles into it, there's that excitement that's there. I don't know, I always look very longingly at those bar mitzvah boys because I actually remember what that was like. And to be honest, I feel it, when I feel it? I feel it like Isru Chag after Pesach. When I haven't put on tefillin for a week, there's that excitement of doing, but it's hard. It's hard to generate it day in and day out. And that's the Musar Haskell in this, right? You could have a guy who enters into the Beis HaMikdash, is like, it's Beis HaMikdash, right? Who knew? Who knew that I was standing under the Beis HaMikdash? Because anything that comes with regilus, person really has to work on for his chachos. All right, now the Gemara says as follows. So therefore, whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect? Right? It doesn't reflect Rabbi Shmuel, right? Because Rabbi Shmuel holds that for Shevuos Bitoy, for an oath of an utterance, you're not chayav for future oaths, and our Mishnah clearly says that you are. And it's not Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva says you're only chayav for a lapse of Tumah awareness, but not for a lapse of Mikdash awareness. So what's going on? Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says the truth is we could set this up in accordance with both of them. How so? Rabbi Shmuel, right? If you say that it's Rabbi Shmuel, mehen lechiyuv or mehen liftar. So we'll say maybe the Mishnah read like this. When it comes to Shevuos, there are shtayim shein arba. It's true, there are 2 cases that are 4. But you're not necessarily liable for all of those cases. In other words, there are 4 cases of Shevuos bitui. 2 cases of future tense Shevuos and 2 cases of past tense Shevuos. For some of them, there's liability. For some of them, there's not liability. And that could fit beautifully with Rabbi Shmuel. V'bais ema Rabbi Akiva, mehen lechiv, mehen liftar. Same with Rabbi Akiva. Ultimately, again, there are 4 cases of tumah or lapse of tumah awareness. Some of them there's liability for, i.e., when you forget that you're tameh, and other cases there's not liability for, when you remember that you're tameh, but you forgot that it was kodesh or mikdash. Maybe that's the way to reconcile it. To which the Gemara will say, Amud Beis, ha dumya demaros negoim katani. That doesn't work. Because remember again, all 4 of the cases are mentioned together. And for example, when it comes to the tzaras case, so remember again, Shab Tumah and Shevuos have to be comparable to the tzaras case. By the tzaras case, ma hasam kula l'chiyuva, af hachanami kula l'chiyuva. But it doesn't work. Just like in the tzaras case, right, the shtayim shein arba, all 4 cases are liable, right? All 4 cases, you have seis and baheres, which yields 2 more cases of liability. Just like in tzaras, all 4 cases are quote-unquote liable. So too in all the cases of the Mishnah of Shtein, Shein, Arba, it has to result in 4 cases of liability. So to create this model where for some you're liable, for some you're not, doesn't make any sense. Okay, the Gemara goes weiter. The Olam, so we'll say, so again, understand, what are we trying to do over here? Right, what's our goal? Our goal is trying to figure out, we have a Stam Mishnah, right? Remember again, we have a Mishnah without attribution. So what we're trying to figure out is, whose opinion, who is the Tana of our Mishnah? The way the Gemara started is almost by process of elimination. We seem to eliminate Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva from the running because of their previously held positions. To which the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Shmuel. No, it could be Rabbi Shmuel. Remember again, why did we initially exclude Rabbi Shmuel? Because Rabbi Shmuel holds that by Shevuos Bitui, right, by declarative oath, he holds it's only past tense Shevuos, not future tense Shevuos. But maybe Rabbi Shmuel, how so? The old Rabbi Shmuel, v'chi lo mechayiv Rabbi Shmuel l'sha'avar karban, aval malkis chiyuve mechayiv. Oh, okay. Perhaps it is Rabbi Shmuel. When do we say that Rabbi Shmuel says that you're not chayiv for a past tense shvuas bitui? That means you're not chayiv a karban. But what are you chayiv? You're chayiv malkis. Chayiv malchus. So Rabbi Shmuel doesn't mean to say you're not chayiv. He means to say you're not chayiv a karban, but there absolutely is still liability. So the Gemara says, Uki de Rava, da Amarava, bepeir shrib satora shvuas sheker, dumyu de shvuas shav. Shabbos say Rava holds like this. The Torah explicitly says that a false oath is like an oath in vain. Now this is very interesting. What is the difference between a shvuas shav and a shvuas sheker? So if you look at Rashi, so actually, if you go right across, you see the Rashi Kid Rava, that Divrei HaMaskal, it's the last white line in Rashi. You see that? So go into that Rashi and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines in. You're not counting. Why are you looking at me? Right? 7 lines down in the Rashi. 7 lines down in the Rashi. Second word in. This is a very important Rashi. Rashi says, this is very interesting. What's a Shvuas Shav? Or say a little bit differently, if you see where we are in the Gemara, it's right across in Rashi. Right? It's right across in Rashi. Shvuas Shav. Rashi says, what is a Shvuas Shav? It's a very important definitional Rashi. Hu nishba l'shanos es hayadua. A Shvuas Shav is when you swear to change something that is clearly apparent and obvious. For example, Kegon al ha'ish shehu isha. Rashi says, again, this is not political commentary, I promise. I'm just reading Rashi. Right? Rashi says, if you say, I swear that this man is a woman, right? Rashi says, that's Shevuos Shav. A man is not a woman. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter how you identify. It doesn't matter what box you check off, right? These are anatomical and physiological realities. And no matter what you think, you cannot change those realities. So that is what's called a Shevuos Shav. It's interesting. That's not called the Shevuos Sheker, right? That's not called a false oath. That is called an oath in vain. So in other words, when I swear about something that is clearly objectively visible and certifiable, and I swear to the contrary of that, that is an oath in vain. So look at Rashi again. So he says, the Lashon is, and again, we're going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's Nishba l'shanos es hayadua. You swear to change a pre-established fact, which you cannot change, right? That is called Kigon ala ishu isha va'ala even shehu zav. Or there's a stone, and I swear this stone ultimately, again, is a piece of gold. Okay, so these statements are absolutely meaningless. You can't swear to change, you can't change realities. That is called the Shav Mashma Davar Sheina Klum. Because we'll say the Lashon of Shav, what does Shav mean? Shav means nothingness. So to swear and to say something that is an absolutely unequivocally meaningless statement. Now, interestingly enough, is it a false statement? Yeah, but we're going to see a Shevuos Sheker is something different. A Shevuos Shav is Nishba l'shanos es hayadua. There is an established fact. You swear to change that fact, but you're wrong. That's called the Shevuos Shav. What's a Shevuos Sheker? Look at Rashi. Shevuos Sheker minalan Shevuos she'ino nikar im emes im lav. They both say Shevuos Sheker is a case where someone takes an oath, and at the time they take the oath, I have no idea about if they're swearing about true or not true, right? I swear, Ruvain entrusted with me his computer to watch. I swear I did not misappropriate it. I don't know. Did you? I mean, that's not the best because that's Shevuos HaShomrim. But you understand, in other words, he may be lying, he may not be lying. I swear I paid my debt. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. If it turns out later on then that I'm lying, that's then called the Shevuos Sheker. So we'll say, again, we're going to spend a lot of time on these things, but really quite fascinating. All right, so the Gemara goes weiter. So the Amar Rava. So in other words, the Gemara suggests maybe our Mishnah is really like Rabbi Shmuel. And Rabbi Shmuel said, when Rabbi Shmuel said that there is no liability for a past tense Shvuah, for a past tense Shevuos Bitui, he meant there's no carbonic liability. But there's still liability. You still get malchus. Like Rava, what did Rava say? Dama Rava, the Torah Shevuos Sheker doing the Shevuos Shav. The Torah itself equates a Shevuos Sheker with a Shevuos Shav. How so? Mashav l'sha'avar, av Sheker nami l'sha'avar. Now both say by definition, a Shevuos Shav is always a retrospective Shevuah, right? Because a Shevuos Shav is taking something that already exists and trying to change it into something else. So therefore, again, a Shevuos Shav is always retrospective, right? Is always the Sha'avar, is always past tense. So therefore, Sheker is also refers to something that already occurred. And therefore, again, the Gemara says, in the same way, and for both of these Shevuos, ultimately, there's a Chiv Malchus. So therefore, maybe when Rabbi Shmuel says that you're not chayiv for a past tense Shevuos Bitui, he meant a carbon. But there absolutely is still liability in the form of Malchus, in which case the Mishnah could still work according to him. So the Gemara says, all right, let's analyze this. Bishlam achalti v'lo achalti kiderava. So both say, I understand, fine. So you could have a Shevuos Bitui. For example, I swear I ate the challah, or I swear I didn't eat the challah. Okay, so that case could work. Why? Because I will say again, and then assuming that I'm in violation of that oath, I'll be chayiv malchus, a retrospective shvuah that certainly fits the paradigm of a shvuah sheker or a shvuah shav. Okay. Shalo ochal ve'achal nami lav shiyish b'maisa. Similarly again, if I swear, I will not eat the challah, and I do eat the challah, there's also liability for that because that's a lav sheyesh b'maisa. Again, I violated something. Listen to this. Ela ochal velo achal amai. But we'll say, what about the case? Now we're getting a little bit technical over here. What about the Shevuos Bitui that says like this? I swear I will eat the challah. and then what happens? I didn't eat the challah. Why should there be liability in that case? Lav she'in b'maisahu. We'll say back to Ramakis days. Is lav she'in b'maisa. This is right. This is appropriate. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I didn't do something. Okay, in general, right? In general, the halacha is that alav shein b'maisa in lokin alav, right? So again, why would I be liable for this type of Shevuos bitui? Kasav Rabbi Shmuel lav shein b'maisa lokin alav. Okay, so that's a simple answer. Simple answer. Rabbi Shmuel holds. Now, we saw this in Makis. Not everybody agrees with this principle. That principle of lav shein b'maisa, right, in lokin alav, is subject to dispute. Rabbi Shmuel himself is of the opinion that a lav shein b'maisa lokin alav. So just to understand the way we're setting this up over here is we're looking to hitch our Mishnaic wagon to a particular Tana. We kind of dismissed Rabbi Akiva out of this, right? Because Rabbi Akiva had an issue ultimately again with Tumah. Certain types of tumah, so that wouldn't work. So now we're hitching our Mishnaic wagon to Rabbi Shmuel. What about the fact that Rabbi Shmuel said that there's no such thing as a past tense Shevuos bitui? So we're trying to say over here, no, what he meant was there's no carbonic liability, but there's absolutely malchus liability. To which the Gemara says, but in general, how could there be liability for a future tense Shvuah of sha'ochal, I will eat, and then I don't end up eating? How could Rabbi Shmuel hold there's liability for as lav shein b'maisa? To which the Gemara answers, Rabbi Shmuel holds that you're loka for a lav shein b'maisa. Okay? Here's the problem. Now, Kashya to Rabbi Yochanan. The problem now, Abba says, if we go this approach, we have a contradiction between the two positions of Rabbi Yochanan. If you take a look at Rashi says over here, Ihachi, it's in the bottom wide lines, about 5 lines in Ihachi. Demasnisin b'malchus, right? So now what we're establishing over here, right, we just established is that at least in certain cases when the Mishnah says you're liable, liability doesn't mean to a carbon, liability means to malchus. That's what we're suggesting over here. If that's the case, that the Mishnah is talking about malchus, ustam lan lav she'in b'maisa lokin alav, kash Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're saying 2 things. Number 1, liability in the Mishnah doesn't necessarily refer to carbon, it could refer to malchus. Now we've also established is that you get malchus for a lav she'in b'maisa. If those 2 truths, if those 2 things are being put forward as truths, now we have a problem with Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Here we go. On one hand, Rabbi Yochanan, halacha kistam Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan holds in general that the halacha is like a stam Mishnah. I will say now again, our Mishnah is a stam Mishnah, which would then mean the halacha follows our Mishnah, which then also means what? Lav she'in b'maisa lokin alav. Right? Again, if you hold like Rabbi Yochanan, that halacha kistam Mishnah, we have a stam Mishnah. The way we just established our stam Mishnah is like Rabbi Shmuel, right? And Rabbi Shmuel holds lav she'in b'maisa lokin alav. That means again, the takeaway message from our Mishnah is that you get malchus even for a lav that doesn't have a maisa. Okay, here's the problem. Ve'itmar shvua sha'ochal kikar zu hayom v'arayom v'lo achla. Yet Rabbi said, listen to this halacha. I swear that I will eat this loaf today. I'll eat this loaf of bread on Sunday. And what happens? V'avra hayom v'lo achla. And yet, again, the day goes by and I didn't eat the loaf. What's the halacha? Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish tamid tarvayu ein aloka. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both agree, I don't get malchus. Now they both agree, but they agree for 2 different reasons. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, ein aloka. Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't get malchus. Why? Mishom tahava lav she'in b'maisa. Because Rabbi Yochanan holds ultimately, again, it's a lav she'in b'maisa. It's a lav she'in b'maisa. And therefore, what? Lav she'in b'maisa, ain't lokin love. So we'll say, here it is, by the way. That's the contradiction, right? You see it now? You see before we even go on, you see what just happened over here? Rabbi Yochanan holds that the halacha follows the stam Mishnah. That's not just here. That's a general rule. Rabbi Yochanan says, whenever you see a stam Mishnah, the halacha is always in accordance with that Mishnah. So that's number 1. That's number 1. Now, if that's true, that means the halacha is lav she'in b'maisa, lokin alav. That's from our Mishnah. Yet Rabbi Yochanan himself is on the record as saying what? Lav she'in b'maisa ein lokin alav. Because Rabbi Yochanan holds, I swear I'm going to eat the loaf today. I'm going to eat the loaf on Sunday. Sunday goes by, I don't eat the loaf. Rabbi Yochanan holds, I don't get malchus. Why? Lav she'in b'maisa ein lokin alav. Contradiction. Contradiction between Rabbi Yochanan's own personally held view and his idea that the halacha always follows a stam mishnah. Reish Lakish is ein aloka hasras safeki vasras safek lo shma hasras. So we saw this already in Malchus, right? This is what's called the hasras safek. Why is it called hasras safek? Because it will say essentially, in order for hasra to work, what has to occur? There has to be a certain level of immediacy, right, between the hasra and the act. In this case over here, what happens, right? Again, I swear that I'm going to eat the loaf today. What's the hasra? You better eat the loaf today, because if you don't, you're going to get malchus. Okay, but I have the whole day to do it. So because there's no immediacy, therefore that's what's called the hasra safek. So Rabbi said, but again, we're left with a contradiction, right? Rabbi Yochanan on one hand holds halacha kistam mishnah, and the way we just established our mishnah is like Rabbi Shmuel, and the way we established is dealing with malchus, and the mishnah says lav shein b'maisa lokin alav. Yet Rabbi Yochanan himself just said lav shein b'maisa ein lokin alav. How do we reconcile this? The Gemara says, not a problem. Rabbi Yochanan stama achrina ashkach. Rabbi Yochanan found another stam mishnah. Another stam. You think there's only one stam mishnah in the world, right? So he found another stam mishnah, and apparently again in this second stam mishnah, the second stam mishnah holds that lav shein bo maisa ein lokin alav. What's the other stam mishnah? Hey stama. Which stama is it? Ilema hai stama. If you want to say that it's the following stam mishnah, disnan achal hamosir bitar, right? I'm sorry, aval hamosir bitar. So what's it? Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach. So listen to this mishnah. Person leaves over from the Korban Pesach. Talking about a tar Korban Pesach, right? The proper Korban Pesach. One leaves over nosar, or hashover betame, or one breaks the bone of a Korban Pesach that is tameh. Then what's the halacha? Ein lokes harboim. You don't get malchus for either of these infractions. Now why not? So I understand. Now remember, the halacha is, by the way, you're not allowed to break a bone by the Korban Pesach. Just as an aside, I think we spoke about this, right? Because in Malchus we also had Korban Pesach a number of times. Remember, I think according to the way Sefer HaChinuch brings down, maybe I didn't. Why are you not allowed to break a bone in the Korban Pesach? So in general, why would one break bones? Because like you want to suck out the marrow. So the Sefer HaChinuch says that the whole idea of Korban Pesach is malchus. So royalty doesn't suck on bones. Royalty doesn't suck on bones, right? Royalty has more than enough meat, has more than enough to eat, and royalty will eat around the bone, and that's it, but they don't break bones. So therefore, because we're supposed to conduct ourselves, but I will say, interestingly enough, the prohibition of breaking a bone only applies to a Korban Pesach that is consumable, i.e. tahar. If for some reason the Korban Pesach becomes tameh, there is no prohibition of breaking the bone. Okay, Bekasher lo b'pasal aval amosir bitar my taima. But I will say ultimately again, if you leave over, right? If you leave over no sar. Why is there no malchus? Again, you're not supposed to leave over from the Korban Pesach. If you do so, ultimately again, why are there no malchus? My taima lav mishum da havi lav shein b'maisa v'chol lav shein b'maisa ein lokin alav. Oh, what's the answer? The answer must be because leaving over Rabosai is a lav shein b'maisa, right? Rabosai, the act of leaving over is what? It's inaction. I didn't eat everything. In other words, Rabosai, remember, how do you have leftovers? Right? We have leftovers is you didn't consume something. So this is a lav shein b'maisa. And what does the Mishnah say? What does the Mishnah say? You don't get malchus. So again, Rabbi Yochanan has another stam mishnah that he aligns his personal position with, right? Rabbi Yochanan himself is on record as saying, you don't get malchus for a lav she'in b'maisa. And now there's another stam mishnah by Korban Pesach that backs that up. Again, is there another stam mishnah, i.e. our mishnah that contradicts that? Yeah, that's true. Rabbi Yochanan does have another stam mishnah that aligns with his particular position. So the Gemara says, Umimai, Rabbi Yaakov, he de Amar Lav Shem B'Maisein Loken Alav. Dum Rabbi Hudahi, Umishum Deba HaKosov Litain Aseh Achar Lo Saseh. So now the Gemara says, 1 second. And how do we know that ultimately, again, that it's Rabbi Yaakov who holds that a Lav Shem B'Maisa you don't get malchus on? Perhaps Dilma Rabbi Yehudahi. Perhaps it's the position of Rabbi Huda. And the only reason, ultimately, again, that you're not going to get malchus in this case is why? Because we both say it's a lav hanita klase. Back to our malchus days, right? Why is it a lav hanita klase? Because the Torah says whatever is left over, what do you do? What do you do? Burn it. Burn it. That's how you don't get malchus. The Gemara says, ha lav hachi lucky. But were it not for the fact that it's a lav hanita klase, were it not for the fact that it's a prohibition that could be remedied by the performance of a positive commandment, you would get malchus for it, which shows you that what? You do get malchus even for a lav she'en b'maisa. Disanya, because we learned, lo sosimenu ad boker, the Torah says, do not leave over anything until the morning. And if you leave something over until the morning, burn it. Shabbos say, what do you see from here? There's a lav. What's the lav? Don't leave over. But then there's an assay. What's the assay? If you do leave over, make sure to burn it. So the Gemara says, so the Torah is coming to give an assay after the los assay. Lomar, she'loken of the Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda says, that's why I don't get malchus. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, lo min Hashem huzeh. That's not the reason. Ela mishum dahavi lav she'en bomaisa. V'lav she'en bomaisa ein lokin alav. So Rabbi Huda, so again, that's that first position of Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Yaakov comes along and says, no. The reason you won't get malchus is not because it's a lav hanita klase. Right? The reason you won't get malchus is why? Because it's a lav she'en bomaisa. Sefer Rabbi say, just to highlight where we are in this moment, right? Where are we up to in this moment? Because we're going to actually pause here for just a second, right? Where are we up to? So we're up to over here, the following place, right? So remember, we're trying to figure out attribution of our Mishnah. It was really, we narrowed it down, or we said off the bat, it can't follow two opinions, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva, because again, Rabbi Akiva only holds that it's only a lapse of awareness of tumah that makes you chayiv a karban, but a lapse of what we'll call a lapse of locational awareness, right? Or a lapse of consumption awareness, that's not going to generate tumah liability. So that kind of knocks Rabbi Akiva out, leaves Rabbi Shmuel. Now, originally we said Rabbi Shmuel is not going to work. Why? Because Rabbi Shmuel holds that you're not chayiv karban olav yored for future-oriented Shevuos bitui. Shevuos bitui. And the Mishnah says you are liable, to which the Gemara answers, no. Rabbi Shmuel holds you're not chayiv a karban, but ultimately, again, you are chayiv, you are going to be chayiv malchus. And therefore, again, the Mishnah is talking about a case, ultimately, again, not just of carbonic liability, but of malchus liability. Now, interestingly enough, the reason why this brought up an interesting case is because how can you be chayiv malchus? How can you be chayiv malchus in the case of, right, I swear I will eat, and I didn't end up eating? After all, again, isn't that a lav she'en bomaisa? To which the Gemara answers, Rabbi Shmuel holds, you get malchus for a lav she'en bomaisa. Okay, so if you paused over there with that, the beauty of that was, now, okay, the Mishnah is like Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Shmuel holds we're talking about malchus, and Rabbi Shmuel holds you get malchus for a lav she'en bomaisa. The problem is now that triggered a whole other storm. What storm did it trigger? Because that means that our Mishnah, which is a stam Mishnah, paskins, you get malchus for a lav she'en bomaisa. Here is the problem. Enter Rabbi Yochanan, right? Rabbi Yochanan holds that the Mishnah halacha always follows a stam Mishnah, which would seem to indicate then that what? The halacha follows our Mishnah, which is you get malchus for lav she'en b'maisa. What was the problem? Rabbi Yochanan himself holds that you don't get malchus for lav she'en b'maisa. So how do you reconcile the personal position of Rabbi Yochanan with the fact that Rabbi Yochanan holds that you always hold like a stam Mishnah? To which the simple answer the Gemara gave was, because Rabbi Yochanan has a different stam Mishnah that he aligns himself with. And that stam Mishnah ultimately says, you don't get malchus for lav she'en b'maisa. What's the problem? The problem is we just effectively deconstructed that second stam Mishnah. We effectively deconstructed it, which then leads us back to our original question, but our question, which is, how do we reconcile Rabbi Yochanan's statement that the halacha follows a stam Mishnah, which in our context now means you get malchus for a lav she'en b'maisa, with Rabbi Yochanan's personally held position that a lav she'en b'maisa ein lokin alav. So Rabbi say this is where we're stopping, and now again, that's why I just want to show you how the next line picks up. We'll leave it for tomorrow. Ella hai stama ashkach. We're going to see the next stage in this journey is Rabbi Yochanan himself actually found another stam Mishnah. So I just want to tell you, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, right? I promise you, we're going to work it out. I see like some of this, like a little existential angst over here. It's going to be okay. We're going to work it out. But again, I will say, like a lot of things in life, we're not working it out today. Not right. Sometimes I know the problem's going to get solved. I can't necessarily solve it on the timeline that I want, right? That's part of what we learned through Gemara as well. So rest assured, go with confidence that Amir Hashem, come tomorrow, we're going to work it out. Today I'm going to have to live with a little bit of ambiguity, but Amir Hashem resolution comes in tomorrow's daf. Rabosai, what a way to start the week. Shkayach. All right, have a great day, everyone.